Let's begin. We are on Daf Yutes Amid Aleph. We are actually right on top. We're starting the Gemara. So the Mishnah had said that the Kohen Gadol goes from one room, from the Lishchas Parhadrin, to another room, the Lishchas of the family of Abitas, to learn about how to do the Ketayros. Right. So most of this Gemara is going to be mainly, and we're going to fly through it. I can tell you this. Mostly extraordinarily technical for a good chunk of the Yomid. The real question is, what side of the Beis Hamikdash was the Lishchas Parhadrin, and what side was the Lishchas Beis Avitas? He's got to move between two different chambers. Which side was the chamber where he slept in the Lishchas Parhadrin, and which side was the Lishchas Beis Avitas? That is mostly the entire discussion, at least for the first moment on this thing. All right? And once you got that, you know where we're driving to. No point in getting too bogged down in the technicalities. So first of all, the Gemara says, Tana, why did he move over during the day? Why did he move over to the Avitas family chamber? Because Lamdei Chafino, to learn how to fill up his hands with the incest. And as Rashi says on the top line, they took him lebeis Abtinas, Shama Ketairis Motzi. That's where the Ketairis was found, the incest was found, because they were the family famous for making it, who were able to make the Ketairis that the smoke went straight up in a tower, like a tower. And okay, so that's where they were. Now, remember what I said.
You know, it's very interesting, though.
Yeah.
You know how the everybody copied us, so that also must have to do when they have a new pope.
Yes, exactly.
And they burn, and it goes straight up.
It goes straight up. Exactly. So you the whole pope thing, the way he dresses.
Yeah, it's like a Kohen Gadol.
It's not
with a kippah and everything.
The kippah and everything. Right. And he's wearing, really what he's wearing is a beketcha. If you think about it, he's wearing a Chassidish beketcha with a different color. Right? Exactly.
No, there's no question about it.
No question about it.
And also you see that he's dressed differently than all the cardinals.
All the cardinals, exactly.
It's exactly the same thing.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. They have no idea where they get their own stuff from. I'm telling you. It's unbelievable. Here we go.
All right, I don't want to stop us. Go ahead.
Yeah, we got to be careful. We don't know who's listening. Other Papa says Papa. Here we go. So now we said, there were two chambers for the Kohen Gadol. One, as we talked about before, the Lishchas Parhadrin, where he went to sleep. It became his sleeping quarters for the 7 days that he was sequestered. And one was the Abtinas family chamber where he would go to learn about the Ketairos. Now here's the question. One of these rooms was in the north of the Azara, and one of these was in the south of the Azara. It's not because we learned now, as is always the case, in places in Shas, there are going to be great machlokes about how many gateways and how many rooms were there really on each side of the thing. So this is a Tana, not the Tana. Let me repeat. It's a Tana's opinion on how many there were. Okay, as there were 6 chambers into the Azara. 3 in the south, and 3 in the north, and 3 in the south. In the south, Lishchas HaMelach, there was a Lishchas of the salt, Lishchas HaParva, the Parva chamber, which we're going to learn what that means in a minute. Parva was the name of a family. Lishchas HaMendichim, and the ritzing chamber. Lishchas HaMelach, the room for the salt, that's where they would put salt for the offerings, because the salt was the way, of course, to preserve and to drain the blood. Lishchas HaParva, the Parva place was where they actually salted the hide of the holy, of the sacred offerings. In other words, you had one room that stored the salt and another room where they used the salt. Why was it called parva? Because that was the first person that used it or may have given the money to build that room. Al Gaga, on its roof of the Lishkas Parva, Haisa base to be low. There was a mikvah. The Kohen Gadol b'Yom Kippurim for the use of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. We're not discussing this now, but the Gemara later on, next week, I believe, or the week after, is going to discuss this mikvah. When exactly did he use it? Because the reality of this mikvah is, if this room was really outside the Beis Hamikdash, meaning it was built into the walls, sticking outside, so that it wasn't holy, and then this mikvah was simply being used, it was simply being used because when you come into the Beis Hamikdash, you have to go to the mikvah. Everybody has to go to the mikvah before you go into the Beis Hamikdash, which is where the minig of the Hasidim to this day, that when they come to shul, first they go to the mikvah and then they go to shul. It's a copy of what was done in the Beis Hamikdash. Anyways.
In our diagram, by the way, in the diagram, it shows that it's within the Beis Hamikdash and it's also on the roof. It shows that.
Right. So again, we're going to see where these things are.
Okay, fine.
And it's not for today, because today we're just going through the whole, the pieces of the puzzle.
Fine.
The rinsing chambers where they rinsed off, obviously, the inside of the carbons. And from there was a circular staircase that came from the roof onto the private chamber. So in other words, there was a connection between this room and that room through a circular staircase. Shloisha b'tzofa, there were 3 in the north. Lishkas ha'etz, Lishkas ha'goyla, Lishkas ha'gozes. The chamber of the wood, and the chamber of the wood had nothing to do with wood, because we know already that in the Ezras Noshim there was a room that was set aside for storing the wood. And in fact, the Kahanim Balei Mumin, the Kahanim who had a defect, okay, that have a mum, that cannot serve, as this week's parsha, cannot serve cannot do the avodah, nonetheless are full-fledged kahanim. They're full-fledged. They can eat kachim, as we're going to see. They don't have to change their clothes, right? They wear the same white clothes as the kahanim, right? The only thing is, since they cannot do the avodah because of their mum, right? Which I'll be discussing today, actually, in the Torah that I'm sending out for Friday. This is the topic that who created the Balei Mumim? HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So in the eyes of Hashem, they're perfectly good. So what's the problem? Why can't they serve? So, but anyways, so the reason why it was called the wood is really up for a discussion. It's really it might have been built by good, but it may have had some wood components in there. Anyways, it is what it is. Next, we have the Lishkas HaEitz, Lishkas HaGoyla, the chamber of the diaspora. That means the people that came up in the diaspora. Lishkas HaGozis, and that's the chamber of the hewn stone, the stones that were cut out. As we're going to discover, that's where the Sanhedrin HaGedolah sat. That's where the great Sanhedrin, the Supreme Court, sat. Lishkas,
that's the biggest room.
Yeah, Lishkas HaEitz. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. I don't even remember what it was used for. Abba Shaul said Lishkas Kohen Gadol. It was in fact the Lishkas Kohen Gadol, meaning that the Lishkas HaEitz is in fact either the Lishkas Parhadrin or the Lishkas Beis Havitas. It's got 2 different names. It's either the Parhadrin room or the Beis Havitas room, depending on where I say each one is. That's what Abba Shaul is saying. Says the Mishnah. Though the Lishkas HaEitz, the chamber of wood, was situated behind both of these other 2 chambers, behind the Lishkas HaGoyla and the Lishkas HaGozis, the Gag, Bishloshten Shavar, all 3 roofs were the same height. It's like essentially one roof. Lishchas hagoyla, shayisham bar hagoyla, because there was a well of the diaspora, for whatever reason was called that. Galga Nostan Olav, and there was a wheel placed on it to facilitate the drawing of the water. Speaking Mayim L'chol Azara, and this is where the whole courtyard got its water. Lishchas Hagozis, Sham Hoyis Sanhedrin Shal Yisrael Yosheves V'Dona Es HaKahanim. That's where the great Sanhedrin of Klal Yisrael sat and judged the Kahanim. What does that mean? They judged the Kahanim. The main job of the Sanhedrin on a daily basis was to check the yichus, the lineage of all new Kahanim coming to serve, and to make it sure that they were allowed to serve based on their yichus. Secondary, because if they could not, if they could not serve because of their lineage, they were actually, their clothes were changed. They didn't put on the white begodim, they put on black begodim, as we're going to see, and was sent out. But Balei Mumim, who are not allowed to, but are full-fledged Kahanim, right? They're not allowed to serve, but otherwise they're full-fledged Kahanim. They stayed with the white clothing, as we're about to see. One where they found a psul, they clothed him in black, and he wrapped his own head in black. And he would leave the chamber and depart from the courtyard. That means that is only beyichus, but not a balmum. Every other kohen, put on white and wrapped his head in white, and would enter, would serve with his brethren the Kahanim, and that includes the Bali woman. Look at number 16 in the bottom. This applies only for Kahanim whose pedigree was found faulty. It was determined that a Kohen had a blemish which disqualified him from doing the Avodah. He would remain in the Beis Hamikdash and assist in deworming the wood that would be burnt on the altar. In other words, he was qualified to receive a share of the sacred offerings and eat them. Okay? So the point of it, of course, is, right? The point of it is, okay, this is the point.
That it's only the pedigree that would make him totally disqualified.
Right, and I'm making this point because the truth of the matter is, if you think about it, why would Balei Mumim not be allowed to do it? They're born this way, or it happened this way. Who creates them? HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If they're created by Hashem, or it happened, right? What happened with Moshe Rabbeinu? When Moshe Rabbeinu didn't want the job, he said to Hashem, Bani Aral Sefasayim.
Right.
Now, he wasn't born in Aral Sefasayim, he became of an Aral Sefasayim. Was the medrash where he picked up the coal as opposed to the ground. What did Hashem say? Who made that? That didn't happen by accident. That's because I commanded it. So I guided it. Who makes everybody? Ani Hashem. It is I, Hashem, with the name Rachamim, not the name Din Elokim, Elokeinu. Ani Hashem, because that's the point. The point of it's from the point of view of Hashem. You're exactly the way you're supposed to be. So in that case, so then comes the question, so why aren't they, if they're allowed to eat from the kosher? And the truth is they wear white just like all the other Kohanim. And just like the other Kohanim, they're not kicked out of the Beis Hamikdash. They do work. They check for the worms and they check for the veracity of the wood to be used on the Beis Hamikdash, on the altar. So why is it that they can't do the actual Avodah? And that we'll talk about today in the what he called, hopefully in the shtickle tire that I sent out for Friday. So here we go. Says the Gemara Vaita, Achas B'Dorim. One of the rooms of the Kohen Gadol was in the south. It's not Shivish Yorim Hoya Be'Azorim. There were 7 gateways into the courtyard. Now, there's another brisa that says there were actually 13 gates into the courtyard. Again, we're dealing with a Tana, not the definitive psak and how many gates there were. Shiva Sharam Ayabazar, Shleisha B'Tzafan, B'Shleisha B'Darim, B'Echa B'Mizrach. Shebedorim in the south, Sharad Leka was the fire gate. Shnei Loi Shara Carbon. Second to it was the gate of the offering. And look at Rashi. It's a great Rashi in the skinny lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines into the skinny lines. Shara Deleka B'Shara Carbon. Look at Rashi. Lo Yadati, Lo Manikra Shabamka. I have no idea why they were called these names. If Rashi could say it,
If Rashi doesn't know,
so
that's
we could
unbelievable.
say, exactly. And herein lies a great understanding of who we are as a people. When we learn, we strive for the truth. And the truth also sometimes is, I don't know. And that's okay. And what do you say when I don't know? You move on to the next slide. And that's what we're going to do. Shlishi loy shar hamayim. The third was the west, was the water gate. That was for Sukkot when they did the water libations, Nisuch hamayim, where they poured water every day, right before the beginning of the rainy season, frankly. And so that's where the water came through. Ubimizrach, meaning in the east of the Azara, facing the Ezras Noshim, going back towards the Ezras Noshim, was the Shar Nicanor, which if you look at the diagram is number
15.
Number 15, exactly right, number 15. So, and that again was the famous doors of Nicanor that he brought from Alexandria. He had to throw one of them over because it was a storm, and miraculously the door followed through on the bottom of the boat, and so on and so forth. So, Shlishi, so we said Mizrach Shar Nicanor. And by the Shar Nicanor, Shnei Lishocha Yisayisham. There were 2 chambers there, one on the eastern side, one to the right of the door and one to the left of the Nicanor gate. Achas Lishchas Pinchas Hamalbish. One was the chamber known as Pinchas the clothier, because he was the first one in that room. Achas, because that's where they kept the clothes of the Kahanim. The Achas Lishchas Oiser Chavitin. And the other one was the chamber of those who made the Chavitin. What is the Chavitin? It's the Mincha offering. The Kohen Gadol every day would bring a half a Chavitin in the morning and half a Chavitin at night together with the Karban Tamid. Any new Kohen that came, today was his first day of serving in the Beis HaMikdash, he would have to bring a full Chavitin Mincha. Okay, further. Give me a second. I lost the place here. Got it. Shebitzofa and Shar Nitzuf. In the north, the first gateway at the west was the gate of the rain.
Wait, Shar.
Okay, we're ready to go?
Yeah. My kids are calling from Israel.
Of course.
So I told them I'm going to call them back afterwards. No problem.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, no problem. Here we go. Shebitzofa and Shar Nitzuf. In the north, the first room in the western end was the gate of the Ray. As we're about to see, it was a room that 3 sides was walled by 3 sides, and the 4th side was open, and the sun would come pouring into that room. Binyan Achsad Jahavi, it was structured like a pavilion. Va'aliyah Benuya Gabav, and then upper story was built on top of it. V'sham Kahanim Shaimim Milamala V'Leviyim Milamata. And there, every night, the Kahanim would stand watch from above on the upper story, and the Leviyim below on the ground. Not for security purposes, but as an honor guard. It wasn't proper that the Beis HaMikdash, the house of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, shouldn't have an honor guard. And the Kahanim were above because the Kidashtai, the Kahanim are a higher level, the Leviyim as usual are the peons. And that's the way it is. And it had an opening to the Chel, which if you remember was
the outside border.
Exactly. Shani Loi, second Shara Carbon. Next to it, second to the gate of the Ray was the gate of the offerings. We're on 1983. 1983, Yutes Amid Aleph number 3. Shlishi Loy Shar Beis HaMoikid. The third of it on the west was the Beis HaMoikid, which we talked about yesterday and the day before. The one with rooms 30, 37, 38, 39, 40, meaning 2 rooms inside and 2 rooms outside. The Lishchas HaTaleh, the Lishchas Elechem Aponim, the Lishchas, all the different Lishchas. Okay? Now, so what do we see from this Mishnah? That the water gate, right? The gate of the water, right? The Lishchas Shar HaMayim was in the south. That's what we said. The Shar HaMayim was in the south. Now, but what we learned, Chumash to be Sarah Kedush Table, Kohen Gadol Mibekdash by B'Yayim. On Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol had to immerse himself 5 times and wash his hands and feet 10 times. The Kulam B'Kodesh Al Gab Beis HaParava. And all of these immersions were done in the holy, in the mikvah that was on top of the Lishchas HaParava. Chutz mizu, except for the first one, Shaisa B'chol, that was actually outside in the unconsecrated part. It was outside the wall, Al Gabi Shar HaMayim. That was the mikvah that was on top of the water gate. Ubitzad L'shchasei Habe, and it was right next to the Kohen Gadol's chamber. So what do we see? That the Kohen Gadol had a room right next to the water gate on the southern side of the courtyard, in addition to his room that he had on the north side. So, in other words, the Kohen Gadol stayed right next to Watergate. There you go. Very good. So now you got it. Okay? Now, why was this one mikvah outside the actual environs of the holy? Why was it in the chol, in the unsanctified part, meaning on the other side of the wall? Because this was the mikvah, because nobody was allowed to go into the Beis HaMikdash without first going to the mikvah. It was just a rule of, was a simple basic rule. So you obviously have to go to a mikvah outside the Beis HaMikdash. This is the one that they made for the Kohen Gadol. So Frank the Gemara, what says Rav Papa, V'lo yadana, I don't know, Lishchas Prahadrim B'Tzofen or Lishchas Beis Avitas B'Dorim, that this room in the south, next to the water gate, next to the Shar HaMayim, was it the Prahadin? Was the Prahadin chamber in the north, and it was Avitas that was in the south, or just the opposite? Lishchas Avitas B'Tzofen or Lishchas Prahadrim B'Dorim? Or was it that the Avitas was in the north, and Prahadrim, the sleeping quarters of the Kohen Gadol, were in the south? Says Rav Papa, Mistabra makes more sense. The Lishchas Prahadrim B'Dorim Havim. That in fact, the Prahadrim chamber was the one in the south. My Tama. Because now let's take a look at the schedule of the Kohen Gadol during the sequester. Magdim, what would he do first? Magdim Kohen B'Simech Raglo B'Tovil. He would arise every morning, cover his feet, i.e., go to the bathroom, and immerse himself in the mikvah on top of the Shar HaMayim, next to his sleeping quarters in the south of the courtyard. Then he would go to the north and practice doing the chafina for the ketores, the cupping the hands of the ketores by the family of Avitas, the Avitas chamber. Then he would enter the temple, meaning the Heichal v'Ovid Avodah Kula Yoma, and he would do the Avodah all day, because during the 7 days of sequestering, he did the Avodah to get familiar. Towards the evening, they would sprinkle on him, as they did every single day, the mei chatas from the para aduma. And then he would go to the south side and go back and toivel in the Shar HaMayim and the mikvah on top of the water gate, and then retire for the night into bed, into the Bahadrin. Now, why did he use the mikvah again? Because Rabbi Akiva said that a Torah person, a person who is pure, and he gets sprayed with the mei chatas, automatically becomes contaminated. Since he got sprayed he was a Torah Dika Kohen, and he got sprayed with the Mechatas, he obviously had to toivel. Okay? Now, because if you're going to say the Lishchas Panhadrin, the sleeping quarters, were in the north, and Avitas, the room of the Avitas was in the south, let me get this right. Then it doesn't make any sense. It's going to be much more difficult for the Kohen Gadol. Maktim Kohen the Simek Raglov. He would get up early in the morning and use the bathroom. But also then he would have to walk to the south, Vitovil, and Toivel in the mikveh, Vigoma Chafina, and then right there next to it, he would do the practice the Chafina. But also the Beis Hamikdash Robin Avodah Kuliyam, and then he would go to the Beis Hamikdash to do the Avodah all day. Lahadi Penayim Moidolei. Towards the evening, they would sprinkle him with the Mechatas. He would then become Tomei again because he's tar and he's being sprinkled with the Mechatas when he shouldn't have been, theoretically, right? So the says Rabbi Akiva, right? It's Metamet Tahirim, right? So then he would have to go back. But also, he would have to go back to the south and immerse again in the mikvah on top of the Shar Hamayim. And then he would have to go back to the north and go to bed in the Pahat and Shem in the night. Would we make him walk back and forth across it instead of working in a circular pattern, right? Which makes more sense. Elamai, the Bahadrin was in the south, not in the north, and the Abitas was in the north and not in the south. Says the Gemara. Now we're on 1984. No proof. Alam alive. Why wouldn't we go out of the way and make him work a little harder? Nothing wrong with that. We purposely made him have to work harder during the sequestering. To eat tzedaki because if he was a tzedaki, he would do not recognize the rabbinical decrees, which of course make Yiddishkeit, make Judaism that much more difficult and that much more technical. So they would get frustrated and they would withdraw from seeking the position of the Kohen Gadol. Inami, even if the Kohen Gadol was not a tzedaki, so that he should not become a Baal Gaivo, haughty on account of his position. He says, I'm the Kohen Gadol, the whole country is going to be looking at me, the whole world relies on me, and then he has to start working real hard, right? You know, the haughtiness disappears very quickly. Because if you don't want to say this, that we deliberately burden the Kohen Gadol, then obviously we should simply make all the chambers together. Put the Lishchas Panhadrin and the Lishchas Avitas right next to each other. That would solve the problem, right? Inami, Taski Lebechado. Why do you need two? Just make the Lishchas Panhadrin big enough to house the sleeping quarters plus the Avitas. Elamai, it's because we want to work the Kohen Gadol. So in that case, we got no proof that the Bahajim was in the Bahajim was in the south, and the Avitas was in the Bahajim was in the north, and the Avitas was in the south. No, I'm talking about we don't have no proof that the Bahajim was in the south next to the mikveh, and the Avitas was in the north. In fact, it's more reasonable now to say we want to burden them. We want to burden the Kohen Gadol. So guess what? The Bahajim would be in the north, and the Avitas would be in the south. Okay. Now we go on to the next Gemara.
And it says in the footnote that the Rambam agrees.
Right, the Rambam agrees. Yeah.
And that's why the diagram shows it in the north.
In the north, right. And I think what he called, this teaches an unbelievable lesson. We're learning Pirkei Avos now. Ben Heye Omer Lefum Sara Agra. By the greater amount of pain, it means effort, you get rewarded. We also know next week's parsha is Bahar Bechukaisai. Bechukaisai has the famous words, and I'm going to talk about it next week. Shehei Amelim B'Torah, right? In Bechukaisai Telechu Rashi Shehei Amelim B'Torah. What's Amelitz? Amelitz means effort. Effort in Torah. The idea being that the Gemara calls it this: a person rather have kav shaloi mitisha kav shel chaveri. A person rather have one barrel of apples that he alone cultivated and picked than 9 barrels of apples that he got from his friend. 9 is more than 1, but something that comes to you not as effort, but on a silver platter, doesn't have the same value and appreciation. We say the famous words, we all know it, but we never think about it. Right, another line from Pirkei Avos. You will never finish the work. It's not on you to finish. You'll never finish learning Torah. But you're not allowed to give up from it. Just because you know you will never fulfill your goal doesn't mean that you're not supposed to be on the journey. Because life is a journey. It's another way of saying amelutz, effort. Effort doesn't mean that you're going to succeed. But in fact, success is not the definition of success in our world. In our world, the definition of success is amelutz. Are you trying? Are you plugging away? Are you working it? Are you trying to be better today than you were yesterday? In other words, we say ad yoy moisai. That means zayis chukas haTorah, right? Adam ki yomos ba'oil. This is the chukas. The person who passed away in the oil says the Gemara. That means afilu al yoy misa. You're supposed to be involved with the Torah. That even on your day to misa, Rashi HaKodesh, as we're going to go through Shas, I think in the middle of the Baba Kama, or one of the Babas, it says, all of a sudden it switches from Rashi to his grandson, the Rashbam. And it says, Sham Meis Rashi. That's what it says. Sham, right in the middle of the page. Sham Meis Rashi. And it says that Rashi wrote the word, the last word, and then they found it with his pen, and the ink was just, kept smearing.
It was wet.
He was writing, and he just kept, that's it, till the last moment. And that's the whole idea. That's the whole idea. That when you have a choice to make it easy, and this is a lesson we have to learn for our children, frankly, and our grandchildren. We're living in a world where us Jews have never had so much. This is not the normal state of affairs for Jews. The wealth, the Baruch Hashem, everybody's fridge is full, is not the normal way of our people. Not going back just a couple of generations. Eastern Europe, everybody likes to glorify Eastern Europe. It was not a pleasant place to live. For hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, our forefathers struggled to survive day to day, literally. And this is a blessing that we don't even begin to comprehend all that we have today. So, and it's something our kids don't quite understand because they've always grew up with all of this. We who grew up coming out of the war, even if our families didn't come out of the war, but we were surrounded by people that came out of the war. The bottom line is, of course, is that it gave you a different appreciation, right? That we came from nothing and look how fast we built, right? But our kids and grandkids certainly have no clue. They think this was always here. It was always this way. And that's a problem because today kids do not learn history, neither secular history and not Jewish history in the sense of if you don't know where you came from, you don't know where you're going. And that's a problem. It is a huge problem. But anyways, I'm not going to, all we can do is talk about it and hopefully it will change. Now, says the Gemara, we got about 10 minutes, so let's see where we can get to. They said to the master Kohen Gadol, we are the agents of Besdin, and you are the shliach, and you are our shliach and the shliach of the court. So, right, the Gemara, should we say this is a tiyufta repetition of what Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yeshua, said? Dama Rav Huna b'rei Rav Yeshua, hani kahane shluchah d'Rav Chmona. The kahane who do the avodah are in fact shluchah d'Rachmana, are the agents of the merciful one. They're the agents of Hashem. They're not our agents. They're in fact the agents of Hashem. Because if you say they are our agents, we run into a problem. We're now on Amid Base. You test Amid Base. Says the Gemara, do we ever find with something we cannot do on our own, yet our agents are able to do for us? An agent is simply replacing you, right? He's my agent. Shliach shel Adam k'maisai. You hear? Shliach shel Adam k'maisai. So a shliach can only work if I could do it, and I'm asking somebody else to do it. Now, this is extraordinarily hard to understand. Because every carbon Pesach, we are to bring the carbon Pesach. But who does the Zerika Saddam?
Kohen Gadol.
Now, the Kohen, all the Kahanim, right, on Erev Pesach. Think about this now a second. So by them doing the Zerika, we're Mekayim our mitzvah, bringing the carbon Pesach. Aleph, we can't do the Zerika. Number two, I don't even know which Kohen is going to do the Zerika, because all the Kahanim are on call that week, because there's millions and millions of Kabbanas being brought. So what does this mean? So part of the logic is, where there is no choice, like in the case of a Karban Pesach, we must bring the Karban Pesach, and we're not allowed to do the Zerika, and we're not allowed to pick which Kohen is going to do the Zerika. Therefore, the Kahanim become our Shliachs al Karchach against the will, because there is no choice. Where there is a choice, there already it becomes a little different. Taisvis, without going into it, says, what are you talking about? In the Dorim, we have a whole long running machlokes, whether the Kahanim are Shliach Tzarfana or Shliach Tidon, or a hybrid between the two. So how come over here it's a little different? And Taisvis goes into it. I don't want to get stuck there, but it's an interesting. Taisvis said, so in other words, Taisvis says, of course the shliach didon, of course they're ours, but in being ours, they're automatically shliachs of the one most high. In other words, what Yehuda is saying is they're not simply our shliach, they're of course our shliachs, but they're also, without a question, the shliach of Hashem. Anyways, we have to question. Enter the Gemara. Hachi kamalei. This is what we said. Mashpiyim anu elecha al daitenu al das bezdin. We charge you an oath based on our understanding and the understanding of bezdin. Not that on a shlichus. They changed the word. The word shliach is not used here. Okay. 5 more minutes. Here we go. The Mishnah says, "Who payrushu b'ayche v'hein payrushu b'ayche." Do you remember the Kohen Gadol turned and cried, and they cried? Who payrushu b'ayche? The Kohen Gadol turns and cries, "Shechatshu tzeduke," because they suspected him to be a sedusi, a tzedaki. Because what they're really saying to him is, don't prepare the kataris outside in the Azara and carry it prepared into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. You have to figure out a way how to hold the kataris and the coals in your mouth and do it all inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim. That's where you prepare. The Haim Parshin of Boichin, the Amma Yeshua ben Levi, Kol HaChayshin B'Kesherim Loikim B'Gufay. Anybody who suspects innocent people is stricken in the body. In other words, they knew that they're being chayshid him in a sweet way. They were saying, "Are you a sedusi or not? Tzedaki or not?" So everybody was crying by what happened over here. The Kol Kach, almost says the Gemara, no. Why did they make the whole oath in the first place? So that it should not prepare the Ketairis outside the Kodesh HaKadoshim and then bring it inside. Like the Tzedaikim did. And how come the Tzedaikim did it this way? Because they learned the Psukim literally, not figuratively. In other words, they didn't have their reformation, if you really want to understand that. They learned eye for an eye and meant it as if it was an eye for an eye. Chazal, of course, the Torah Shel Peh was given at exactly the same time as the Torah Shel B'Ksav, because of course everything required explanation. Because you ever look at the mitzvahs, you'll realize they're all klalius, they're all broad. The actual particulars of each mitzvah were never given. The mitzvah of tefillin, it doesn't say what tefillin are. The mitzvah of mezuzah, it doesn't say what mezuzahs are. The first mitzvah in the Torah to have children, it doesn't say how many. So on and so forth. Honor your father and your mother and your father you shall fear. What's the difference between honor and fear? And the Torah said, because there came something else along with this, the explanation of my commandment. And that's, of course, what we're dealing with right now. Tanu Rabbana, Maisa b'tzedaiki echad. There was a Maisa with one tzedaki, shehiskim mibechutz v'hichnes, who became a kohen gadol, paid his way into becoming a kohen gadol, and he prepared it on the outside. He prepared it on the outside, and then he brought it in to the Kodesh HaKadoshim, b'yitziaseh, and then he came out of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. He didn't die inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim. And he was sameach in great happiness. His father met him and said to him, even though we are tzedakis, we're still afraid of the Pirushim, the Parsis. Why are they called the Parsis? Parsis really means Parushim. What is Parushim? Parush, the separate ones, which is a play on the words Am Segula, Mikol Amim, a nation separate from all the other nations. We are the separate. Us Orthodox Jews are in the world, but not part of the world. We interact with the world, but in reality, we're sort of separate in the world. We got exactly 2 more minutes over here. Let's finish the story. Amalai, Kol Yomai, Hayisi Mitztala Mikra Zeh. All my days, the sun said, the Kohen Gadol. All my days, I was troubled by this pasuk. Ki ba'onon era al akaparis. From within a cloud, I shall appear. I shall be seen under the ark cover. That means with the ketairos already prepared, with the smoke coming up from the ketairos, that's when I enter the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Amarti Mosa Yomi liyodi b'kamenu. When will I have the opportunity to fulfill this pasuk in the way we, from the Tzedokim, interpret it? Now that the opportunity came to my hand as the Kohen Gadol, I shouldn't fulfill it. Amru, they reported, it was not a few days until he died, and he was thrown into a trash heap and the worms were crawling out of his nose. That's because his nose was the first part of his body that went into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. I thought of a reason because he thought he was right as a Sadducee, that he had the right shot. He raised his nose up and he was haughty. So we're going to stop over here. Now, we're up to 19b1, the VA Shaimer. Nonetheless, for Shabbos, we're going to go. Give me 1 second over here. Boy. Well, there's not a lot of places. Okay, we're going all the way to Chaf Aleph.
That's good.
No, it's too far. It's too far. We're going to go, sorry about that. We're going to go, no, we're not going to go so far. We're going to go over here on 20b2. On 20b2, it says, Rav Ikla Labasre, right at the beginning, 20b2. It's high up.
Okay.
That's where we're going, exactly at the top. And we'll pick it up from there. Have a great Shabbos, Charlie.
Have a great Shabbos. Thank you very much.
Shabbos, you got it. And I'm going to continue over here to just to say the daf. Okay, here we go. So this is now Shabbos' daf. We're up to 19b1, Utes on the base. On Friday's daf, we're on 19b1, the second column, the right-hand column, V'yesh Shaimer. V'yitziyosai Nigaf. On his way out of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, but while yet in the Kodesh, in the Heichal, he was smitten. The Tanya Reb Chia Kemin Kol Nishma Ba'azar Shabbat Malach B'Chavotay Al Panim. Some sort of sound was heard in the Azara, indicating that a Malach had come and struck him on his face. And his brother and brethren, the Kahanim, entered into the Kodesh. And the reason why they entered is because on the day that the Kohen Gadol was doing the Avodah on Yom Kippur and nobody else was allowed to do the Avodah, Nobody else was allowed to be in the Heichal, and certainly not in the Kodesh HaKadoshim during the time when he was doing the Avodah. So they had to come from outside to see what was going on. And he found he had a mark like the sole of a round foot between his shoulders, the mark of a malach. Okay. So if this was the case, so now we're on 19b2. Shenema viragleim regel yisora the kaf ragleim kikaf regel egel. We can pasuk in Yecheskel that their legs means the malachim's legs were a straight leg. It looked like they were standing on a post with one leg, and the sole of the feet were like the soles of a rounded foot. By the way, this is the minhag that when we daven Shemona Esrei, we stand with our feet together, as if it was one straight leg. Yishara, regel yishara, like a one leg, like we're standing like malachim in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Amar Rebbe Zechariah ben Kevutol, says Rebbe Zechariah ben Kevutol, and over there, if you remember, he said, Rebbe Zechariah ben Kevutol, that you can read from any sefer, you can read them in order to keep him awake the night of Yom Kippur, the night of Kol Nidre, in order that he doesn't fall asleep and become Tomei from a seminal emission from Kerry. We first said he could only read from certain svarim, and Rabbi Zechariah ben Kevutol said, no, you can read from any sefer kachim, anywhere from the Tanakh. It's good as long as you keep him occupied. Maaseh Rav Chanan bar Rabba l'chiyah bar Rav kamei the Rav. Rav Chanan bar Rabba taught the Mishnah to Chiyah bar Rav in front of Rav. Amar Rav Zechariah ben Kevutol with a pay. Achilei Rav idei Kevutol. Rav gestured to him with the sound that he should pronounce it Kevutol. But let Rav say it straight out. Says the Gemara, Kriya Shema Bikari, he was saying Shema, he didn't want to interrupt. Sorry, but in that case, are you allowed to communicate with your hands in the middle of Kriya Shema? Shema, one who's saying Shema Allah years by his Ma'inav, should not signal with his eyes, nor mouth words silently with his lips, nor get gesture with his fingers. But Tanya he taught Rabbi Lezer Chisma Oimer. Rabbi Lezer Chisma said, "Akayah Shema the Ramesh Be'ema Umerkas B'Sapasam Umaribetz Ba'Isai." One who signals with his eyes, mouths words silently with his lips, or gestures with his fingers. All of Akasim Oimer Loi Osi Karasi Yaakov, but you do not call out to me Yaakov. So it says the Gemara Loi Kasha. This that you're not allowed to signal with your fingers, etc. The Perek Rishon. This is in the first chapter. The Perek Sheni. This the Rav signal was already in the second chapter. What does it mean, first and second? The Pashtus simply. The first chapter is Shema v'Ahavta. The second chapter would be V'Hoyim Shemaya, and then V'Hoyim the third. There is an argument on this because many say the first chapter is simply the first. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Here Hashem is Lord, Hashem is one. There you have the full concentration. By the time you get to V'Ahavta, that's already the second paragraph. That's the machlokes. Tonu Rabbanon. The pasuk says V'dibarta bam. V'dibar, you shall speak of them. But what is V'dibarta bam? You shall speak in them. Because the Torah Shebeksav starts with Bereshis. With the bays, that's the bays. The Mishnah is Torah Shabbat starts in Masechtas Brachos with the words Me'emasai Koines Shema Barbas. So Torah Shabbat starts with the bays, and Torah Shabbat starts with the mem. Together, bays mem is bom. Vidibar to bom. You shall talk in them. Torah Shabbat Bereshis. With Torah Shabbat Me'emasai. But says the Gemara, you'll speak in them, but not during davening. Don't learn while you're davening. It says, you only have permission to talk on things that you're allowed to speak, but don't speak on other matters. That means at any time, be careful on your speech. Make Torah, make sure in your life and not a temporary preoccupation. Amar Rava, Hasof Sichas Chulin Oiva Basdei, one who engages in just simple, regular conversation is over on a positive commandment, Shenema V'dibar Tabal, Bal V'loi V'dibarim Acherim, but not in other things. V'acha V'yakib Ama Oiva B'lav, the over on a negative commandment, Shenema Kol Atvorim, Yegeyim Lo Yuchal Ish L'daber. All the wearing words a man may not speak. Again, this is in Koheles. Says the Mishnah, we're up to the next Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Bikeshli his name. If the Kohen Gadol wanted to start dozing off at night, the night of Yom Kippur, the night of Kol Nidre, which remember we want to keep him up because we don't want him to fall asleep and then become possibly tummy from a Baal Keri. Pirchei Kahuna, the young Kahanim, just like the word Pirchei by the birds is meaning young birds. So here it's Pirchei Kahanim, the young Kahanim. This is the reason why the Agudah calls their youth program Pirchei. Pirchei Kahuna, Meichin Lefonav Be'etzvat Sirada. The Kohen would snap before him with the Sirada finger, but Pashtus means the middle finger. Like that, because that is the only finger that we can make a loud snap. V'amar Lai Ishi Kohen Gadol, Master Kohen Gadol, Amoy B'hopat Akatz Ala Ritzvah. Stand and dispel your drowsiness on the floor. Gemara is obviously going to talk about this. Take a walk, B'pashtus. Umaskina and Oiseh Shigiyah Zeman Shchita, and they would keep him occupied until the time came for slaughtering the carbon tomid and getting the avodah of Yom Kippur underway. Amar Ma'id, says the Gemara Ma'id Tzarara, what is the meaning of Tzarada? Amar Rabbi Yehuda Tzarasa Dedah. It means the rival finger of this one, which Pashtus would mean, here's the thumb, it would mean the second finger, but for Pashtus it means the third finger because it's the middle finger, because that's the only one that you can really, that a human being can make a snap at. And it might be called the rival because it's the in between. It's like it's the middle finger, the tall one. Mahi Kudo, the thumb, the tzarua finger. It would then be the index finger, which adjoins the thumb. Mechbe Rav Huna would show how to do the snap. Va'azal kali bekuli be'rav, and the sound could be heard through the entire yeshiva. Ramullah Ishi Kohen Gadol Hopek Akas Ala Ritzvah. Dispel your drowsiness on the floor. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, he said, Al Chadas, show us a unique procedure. Mahi, what is the unique procedure? Amalei Chavi Kida, show us how to do the Kida bow. There were many different ways of bowing down. And there was one way called Kida, which sort of almost like they folded themselves in half. For lack of a better way, there was bending at the waist until your face reached the floor, kissing the floor while leaning only on your thumbs and then straightening up. In fact, there was a Tana that did this, and he actually got very injured by it. He pulled the hamstring and he was lame the rest of his life. Anyway, says the Gemara. Masika said, the Mishnah said, Masika is man shkita. We keep him occupied until the moment of the slaughtering of the carbon tomid at the beginning of the day begins to do the carbon tomid and begin the avodah Yom Kippur. Tana we learn, they would not keep him occupied by playing him either the lyre or the harp, only with the mouth. Only with the mouth. Now, partially because you're not allowed to play music on Yom Kippur, but in fact, in the base of English, that did not apply because that was part of the avodah of playing music during the thing. Nonetheless, they didn't want to go, but the Yerushalmi explains they tapped at a beat with snapping of their fingers and singing a song to that tempo of the snapping. I remember what song did they say? Im Hashem lo yivne b'yishav amlu banav. If Hashem would not build the house, in vain to build his labor on it. And the idea over here is that the Beis HaMikdash, the actual house, is totally in us if we do the will of Hashem. Yaakov Avinu, when he slept in Parshas Vayetze, and he saw the sulam, the ladder leading up, and he got up and he said the famous words, Hashem there is Hashem in this place, and I didn't know. Then he said, Ein zeh ki im beis Elokim v'zeh shar shamayim. So how can we start from Yesh Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Midas Hadin, v'makim hazeh, and ends Ein zeh ki im beis Elokim. This is the house of the Lord, Elokim v'midas hadin. But the answer is the makom, the place, is kedusha rishon, kedusha l'shat, kedusha l'os and lovan. Is always holy. Was holy from the moment it was created. The Mikdash Nekat Yitzchak, says the Rambam. In the Mikdash, Yitzchak was brought up on the Akedah, even though that was 900 years before the base of Mikdash was built. Because the place is holy. That has got nothing to do with us. That is a fact. That is the fact. The place is always holy. The bias, the Mikdash, is a base Elohim, Kiyim base Elohim. It's a house of the Kim, the Midas Hadin. If we keep his mitzvahs and behave well, then we have a base of Mikdash. When we don't, we lose it. So we're saying over here, if Hashem will not build the house, in vain do the builders build it. Some of the prominent people of Yerushalayim, in fact, would not sleep all night. So the Kohen Gadol would hear the sound of their voices. And sleep would not overcome him. And in fact, that minhag is today. There are people that do not go to sleep in Kippur at night. Tanya, Abba Shalom said, even in the provinces outside of Yerushalayim, they would do it. They would remain up all night of Yom Kippur. 19b4 was Zeichel HaMikdash as a commemoration to the Beis HaMikdash. That means even when the Beis HaMikdash was standing, in order to be in solidarity with the Kohen Gadol, and even today, Zeichel to what took place in the Beis HaMikdash. Eloi, but in some places, in staying up Yom Kippur night, unfortunately, Shayu Chaitim ended up sinning. What do I mean by that? That they ended up staying up by talking to their wives, and things happened, and they ended up having relations with their wives on the night of Yom Kippur. Omar Abaye, the Tamer of Nachem by Yitzchak, Abaye, and some say it was Rav Nachem by Yitzchak, said, Taguma Nadoi, interpret that we're talking about Nadoi. The Amalei Eliyah the Rav Yehuda Achoy to Rav Salach Chasido. Eliyah Anobi said to Rav Yehuda, this the brother of Rav Salach Chasido. Amrisu Amai Loyose Mashiach. You're always asking why did Mashiach come? But Dino Yom Kippuru, but today is Yom Kippur. And even on this holiest of day, a number of Besulah's virgins were bedded in the doi. Amalei Rav Yehuda said to Eliyahu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu ma'oimer. What did HaKadosh Baruch Hu say about this? Amalei Eliyahu said, and now we're on Shabbos' daf, Chaf Amid Aleph. LePesach Chatas Roivetz. Sin is resting at your door. It's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Cain before he killed Hevel. Look at Rashi. LePesach Chatas Roivetz. Yetzahara mechatiyoi bal karchai. The Yetzahara, it forces you to sin. In other words, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving an answer, saying nobody sins because they want to, but because the Yetzer Hara is coming and driving them crazy, and that's why they sin. In fact, the Chassan Sofer says beautiful on the pasuk that we say on Shabbos Shuvah. Kach tisa ovayin v'kach toiv u'nishal mafarim sipaseinu. Go and take a parah because of our iniquities, u'nishal mafarim sipaseinu, and pay the parahs with our mouths. So yes, what's going on there? An ovayin is amazing. Intentional aveira. On an intentional aveira, we don't bring a carbon. So what is this? Kach toiv u'nishal mafarim sipaseinu. Kol tisa ovayin v'kach toiv u'nishal mafarim sipaseinu. So he answers, he says, after 800 years of Golos, he wrote this back in the 1800s, after 1800 years of Golos, there are no mazidim. There are no intentional sins. Because either we're sinning because of the Shvera Golos, Kushia Golos, the hardship of the Golos, and we're despondent, or because of Taiva, because of desire. And because today we don't have a Navi and we don't have a Chayzer, we're bereft of greatness, right? He said, what do you expect? How are we going to stand up against the Taiva? So the truth is, nobody's moirid b'malchus. Nobody's going in and rebelling against the king. It's just because of desire and because of the long golos. Says Mamela, Kol Tisa Ovad, whoever takes his iniquity, you're taking your iniquity, you should know it's not iniquity. It's not intentional. Shalom, the purpose of saying, bring a carbon with your mouth, daven and make tshuva, because it's okay. I will forgive you because I'm looking at it as an shoygig. And here the Gemara is saying that HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, "Repesach chatas roivitz." Rashi says, "Yetzer v'cheitoi bal karchoi." It's actually all against your will. Who really wants to go against HaKadosh Baruch Hu? It's not the case. So it's all things, and that is why Kippur comes along and is mechaper on everything. The Satan, my Yoma, what did the Satan say? Eliyahu Hanavi said, Satan b'yomi de Kippur lesle reshusei la'astuni. On Yom Kippur, the Satan has no permission to prosecute. In fact, he doesn't prosecute. He turns around, and in fact, he goes ahead. What do you call it? He goes ahead, and he stands up on our behalf, and actually says, today, your people are like Malachim. They're not eating, they're not drinking, they're standing with their feet together to praise you. They're at peace. They're at peace together with each with the other. It's in Pirkei the Rebbe Eliezer brings this. The Rambam brings it in Perek Ten Zayin in Sefer Vayikra. And then he comes, even the Satan comes in and turns into our defender on Yom Kippur. Mimai, from where do we know this? Amir Rabbi Bar Chama, Hasoton, the word Hasoton, B'gematria, Talas Meya Mishitim Arbaha. The word Satan has the numerical value of 364. Hey is 5, Sin is 300, Tes is 9, and Nun is 50, equaling 364. Talasam of Mishitim Arbaha Yomi is the Rishusa La'astune. 364 years of the days of the year, the Sultan has permission to prosecute. The Malach, the Sultan has no power to prosecute on the 365th day of the year. Says the Mishnah Vaita, now we're up to the first Avodah of the day. The Chol Yom Terminus of Mizbeach. Each day they separated the ash from the Mizbeach. They remove the ash by the call of the Gever, waking everybody up. The Gever is like the rooster, the rooster they're calling up or they're about. Bein lefana, bein la'achra, either before it or after it. The proper time for removing the ash was shortly before the first light of the day. And the Rambam says it's done right after the daybreak. But either way, right around there. The Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol did this already from midnight. And on the Yom Tovim, he did it at the end of the first watch. If you remember, the Gemara in Brachos talks about that the night is broken out into 3 watches, the 3 Hashmaris. So we said we got 3 on the Yom Tovim of Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. These took place at the end of the first watch, at the end of the first third of the night. Okay, and the Gemara obviously is going to talk about what's the differences over here. And on the Yom Tovim, even before the call of the rooster, real early in the morning, the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash was filled already with Klal Yisrael in the Ezra's Nosh. Zakti Gemara Tanan also we learned in Zavachim. Avor and Shapaku Miyal Gabe Amizbeach. concerning the limbs of the offerings that burst off the top of the Mizbeach. The fire goes and then, boom, there's a boom and it explodes off the Mizbeach. Koydim chatzais, before chatzais, yachzir, you can return it. You return it to the Mizbeach, and because you can return it to the Mizbeach, and it continues to remain an offering, it means they're subject to be used inappropriately. After midnight, you are not to return it to the altar. That's it. They are now possible to be returned back to the altar. They're no longer an offering, and therefore there's no avera of me'ila if they're used inadvertently. Immediately, how do I know all this? Some Rav says, Rav, we are now on Chav. We are now on Chav Amid Aleph 20a2. 20a2. Chos of Echad. One pasuk says, Kol halayla v'hiktir. All night he shall burn it on the Mizbeach. Okay? It's actually a combination of two psukim. If you take a look at number 14, which is quoting the Rashi, the actual pasuk is V'hu oila ala maktoi ala mizbeach kol alayla ala baiker. Eat the oil that is on the flame of the mizbeach all night until the morning. That means there's a chiyuv to keep the offerings on the altar the entire night, and any limb that propels off the mizbeach should be returned there. But then the next part of the Kosev Echad Kol halayla beherim. All night he shall separate the ash. Right? The pasuk says, "Who will he oila moktan bekal alayla abaike? The lover shakayim midai bad. Beherim is adeshin and removes the removes the deshin. Beherim is adeshin. Asher toichel ha'esh it's oila misbeir. He shall separate the ash of what the fire consumed of the oil on the Mizbeach. Right? The first pasuk indicates that they must remain there the entire night for them to complete burning. Where the second pasuk says that any burnt limb that is on the Mizbeach at night is considered ash and worthy of separation. Which means that if it came off, I shouldn't have to return it to the Mizbeach. Divide the night. Half of it is for burning, and half of it is for separating the ash. That's what we're doing. Half of it is for burning, and half of it is for separating the ash. Until midnight, until Chatzais Halayla, the Avarm, the limbs that have been turned to ash or charcoal that are considered fully consumed. All other limbs must be returned to the altar for further burning if they fall off. After midnight, however, any fire-hardened limb, any aver that was completely charcoal is considered ash. Midnight is the point at which consumption is deemed to be concluded and the separation of the ash could begin. Which would also then mean that things that came over with lavdaf have to be returned after that point, if they weren't completely charcoal. Every day they separated the ash from the mizbeach. At the time of the call of the geber, of the rooster, or afterwards. After the after the end of the first third of the night. We are now on Chaf Amid Beis. Chaf Amid Beis. The Isal Kedatach Mechatzois Diaraisuhu. Now, if you think that this rule of separating the ash beginning at midnight is Minei Torah, is Midiaraisa, hey, Chimik Makdimin, then how could we advance it before midnight on Yom Tovim to the first third, at the end of the first third of the night? And how could we delay it? And how could we delay it with the call of the Geber on the weekdays, or the call of the rooster? At least that's what I'm saying now. Says the Gemara, you're right. From this that the pasuk says it should be on the mizbeach all night. I already know that the time for burning the part of the Evarim extends all until the morning. It goes all night. ad haboika, until the morning. If I say b'chol halayla, if I said all night, that means ad haboika. So what is the extra word ad haboika? Tein boika levakra shalayla. Add another morning to the morning that is at the end of the night, and say that is at the time when the conclusion of the hector ebarim, the burning of the offering up of the ebarim. So we learn that hardened ebarim, which fall off after midnight, do not have to be returned there, right? Because there's a break. Ad habayker tells us that there's a laila ad habayker, that there's a biker before the actual kol halayla of the real biker. Kol halayla tells me all night means until daytime. So what's the word ad habayker? Until daytime. And Lamai, there's another break, which is to say after midnight, look at it as if it's already after chatzos. It's as already heading towards daybreak, right? So anything that falls off the oak doesn't have to be returned. But the separating of the ash can go any time during the night, because you see by the regel that after the first third, they went ahead and they started cleaning off the ash. Hilka, therefore, b'chol yom, every day of the year, terminus hamizbech b'kriyas hagever, or samach loy ben lefana ben la'akrib sagi. They separated the ash of the mizbech at the call of the gever or thereabouts, before or after. We said either right before daybreak or right after daybreak, depending on your opinion. B'yom HaKippurim, the ikar chalush of the kohen gadol, is the schwachness, the weakness of the kohen gadol, who had to perform the entire avodah by himself. Avdina mechatzos. We started at chatzos, give him more time to get it done. Uberegolim the nefishin yisab and nefishin kabbanos, with as many yidin, and therefore there's many kabbanos, many offerings being offered. Avdinin me'ashmos rishon. We do it from the end of the first watch. Kidutani tama, as our Mishnah said, the reason. Even before the call of the gever, the court of the Azara was filled with Jews. My Kriyas Gever. What does it mean, the call of the Gever? Rabba Makara Gavra. It means the call of a person. They would appoint a kohen. The officer in the base of Mikdash would be the announcer. Wake up, would be the alarm clock. Wake up, everybody, time to get started. No, it means the call of the rooster. We are now on 20b2, Chaf Amid Beis 20b2, and we're up to Rav Ikla La'aslei, the Rebbe Shila, Reb Rav